The word worship is a combination of two words, worth and ship. The word worth points to something that deserves honor or respect. Ship as a noun and an adjective is a suffix primarily used to denote the relationship between two domains. As we all know, during the ancient days, ships were the only means to travel between two lands. Hence, the word ship has an iconic significance of connecting two more relations, as in friendship, kinship, partnership, discipleship, leadership, fellowship, ownership, and sonship. If so, the word worship denotes the relationship of a person to the one who is worthy, the one who deserves respect, honor, and glory. Or in other words, worship is our relationship as the creation with the Creator, who alone deserves honor and reverence. It is interesting to note here that the Hebrew and the Greek words in the Holy Bible for worship refer to certain body languages that express our reverence to God. Now we are going to explore three forms of worship mentioned in the book of Genesis. Firstly, worship as Sabbath. At the beginning of the Bible itself, we see God's initiation to observe Sabbath. To the Israelites, God does not give it as an option, but a commandment. We read it in Exodus chapter 20, verse 8. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. In Leviticus chapter 25, verse 2, also we see Lord commands. When you enter the land that I am giving you, the land shall observe a Sabbath for the Lord. From the first 5 books of the Bible, the Torah or the Pentateuch, we can ascribe 3 essential elements about Sabbath. They can be coined as 3 hours of Sabbath: rest, redeem, and reset. First one, rest. Rest does not mean to take a long or deep sleep. Instead, it refers our efforts to withdraw or retrieve from the usual activities or the regular works, and also finding or setting apart some time to be with the Creator. That means a set apart time to be with the Lord. In short, worship as Sabbath is not about being idle, but rejuvenating ourselves by resting at the lap of the Lord. The second aspect of Sabbath is redemption. The threefold timings of Sabbath, that means the Sabbath day, the sabbatical year, and the Jubilee year, reflect the idea of redeeming the land and the people. In the instructions given by God in the book of Leviticus chapter 25, we see God's special instruction to redeem the land by giving rest without cultivation. In Leviticus chapter 25 verse 3 and 4 we read, 6 years you shall sow your field, and 6 years you shall prune your vineyard, and gather in their yield. But in the 7th year there shall be a Sabbath of complete rest for the land. A Sabbath for the Lord. You shall not sow your field or prune your vineyard. Verse 24 says, throughout the land that you hold, you shall provide for the redemption of the land. And it is also a time for redeeming a slave from the bondage. In Deuteronomy chapter 5 verse 15, God reminds Israelites that, remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out from there with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. Therefore, the Lord your God commanded you to keep the Sabbath day. The book of Exodus also reveals God's pain and God's initiative to redeem His people from the bondages. We read that the whole purpose of Exodus itself is worship. Exodus chapter 9 verse 1, God says, let my people go so that they may worship me. Worship, therefore, is a form of exodus from the bondage to freedom. And this is the Sabbath. The third feature of Sabbath is reset. It denotes the capacity of a device to return to its default factory settings or its original state. In the threefold timings of Sabbath, The whole existing system is set to reset. The existing debts, sales, contracts are coming to an end, and the new contracts are begun. Leviticus chapter 25 verse 28 says, "What was sold shall remain with the purchaser until the year of Jubilee. In the Jubilee it shall be released, and the property shall be returned." Verse 31 says, "Houses in villages that have no walls around them shall be classed as open country. They may be redeemed, and they shall be released in the Jubilee." In other words, Sabbath gives us an option to reset and reorient ourselves, ending the existing systems and entering into a new system with the Lord. Worship is this sabbatical experience of reset. Secondly, worship as offering. The second form of worship that we see in the book of Genesis is in chapter 4, verse 3 to 7. Here we understand worship as an offering, as Cain and Abel come before the Lord with their offerings. As a token of their love and respect to God, they offer God a portion of what they have received from God. This they do with an attitude of gratitude. The word kurbana, which we often use to refer the Holy Communion service, is derived from the Aramaic word kareb, meaning offer or approach or bring. In short, every worship is an effort to approach God or bring near to God with what God has given in our hands. Thirdly and finally, worship as a response to theophany. The third form of worship that we see in the book of Genesis is a response to theophany. The word theophany means a visible manifestation of God to humankind. This is the uniqueness that we find in the period of patriarchs such as Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The mandate of worship here is a realization or the manifestation of God's presence in certain places or the point of their life. Whenever they felt the presence of God, we see in the Bible they built an altar for God and worshipped. Such altars or sanctuaries were holy places because they are the places where God chose to appear to meet His people. In Genesis chapter 12 verse 6 and 7, we see Abraham building an altar at Shechem as the Lord appeared to him and said, "To your offspring I will give this land." In Genesis chapter 26 verse 24 and 25, at Beersheba, as the Lord appeared and told Isaac that he would bless his offspring for the sake of his father Abraham, Isaac builds an altar, calls on the name of the Lord, and pitches his tent there. Further in Genesis chapter 28 verse 10 to 22, Jacob builds an altar at Bethel, where the Lord appeared to him. He says, "How awesome is this place! This is none other than house of God, and this is the gate of heaven." To conclude, worship calls us to give God His deserving worth. Such worship in reverence to God in the light of the book of Genesis can be understood in three ways. Firstly, worship is Sabbath, as engage in rest, redemption, and resetting. Secondly, worship is an effort to approach God or bring near to God our offering as well as ourselves as an offering. Finally, worship is our response to God's encounter with us. Dear friends, it is in the worship that we rest with the Lord. It is in the worship that we celebrate our redemption through our Lord. It is in the worship that we reset ourselves with the Lord. It is in the worship that we offer ourselves to the Lord. And it is in the worship that we hear and speak to our Lord. May the Almighty, through His Spirit, empower us to worship Him meaningfully. Amen.